Hello students, today we'll be discussing the role of opposition in Indian politics. The objective behind today's discussion is to give you an understanding about the evolution of opposition in India and its constitutional position. Then we'll try to understand the development of opposition during the Nehru-Gandhi era. Finally, to understand the significance of opposition in the era of coalition politics with special reference to UPA and NDA. Let us first start with the importance of opposition in a parliamentary democracy. True democracy demands the right balance of cooperation and constructive criticism, especially in countries having bi-party and multi-party systems. The Westminster model of parliamentary democracy presupposes the existence of two classes within the governing body, the ruling class and the opposition. In legislatures where representatives are elected on the basis of first past the poll system, opposition, though a minority, actually represents a large proportion of the total population. Members of the opposition in the lower house are called upon to act as a brake on government haste, to ensure that all legislation receives the due process of parliamentary deliberation as to ensure that diverging and opposing views have a chance to be aired and defended. The existence of a vociferous opposition constitutes the bulwark of parliamentary democracy. Opposition has an important role to play through reflection of problems of the electorate by meaningful discussions and deliberations. In a way, it is believed that opposition has to play three important roles. One, to propose. Second, to oppose. And third, to depose. In fact, it is believed that a responsible opposition provides a balanced development in the political as well as the societal system. Though the Westminster model of democracy was introduced in India during the colonial rule, yet we do not find similar principles applied in India. The fundamental principle of parliamentary democracy presupposes the existence of a recognized opposition, as we have Her Majesty's opposition in England, which is also called the government in waiting. Such an opposition never really took shape in India, both in the pre-independence or in the post-independence period, primarily because the Indian National Congress was the only party with a mass following. More so, the role of the Congress in the freedom struggle outled the other political parties, and people strongly believed that the Congress gave them freedom. The same continued even after independence, although the Constituent Assembly did raise the need for a responsible opposition to keep the ruling party from framing anti-people legislations. Now, the Constituent Assembly debates also reflected certain concerns for a responsible opposition. Members of the Constituent Assembly felt that it should be the constitutional duty of the opposition to criticize the government, carry out agitation against anti-people legislations, and arouse public opinion. An interesting observation which seems to come out of the constitutional debates is that the only opposition to the Congress government can either come from the communists or the communalists, especially the Muslims. This shows the antipathy of the members of the Constituent Assembly to insert specific provisions providing constitutional sanction to the opposition in India. A closer look into the constitutional provisions reveal a non-existent opposition, since there is no mention of the term opposition in the Indian Constitution, but either in the national legislature or in the state legislatures. Let us try to understand if the Constitution recognizes an opposition or not. According to Article 75, Clause 1, the President shall invite the leader of the majority party and designate him as the Prime Minister. The Constitution is conspicuously silent on the powers and functions of the opposition parties. Recognition as an opposition party according to the parliamentary rules of procedure of the Lok Sabha meant that a party should have at least 10% of total strength of the House. Now let us try to see whether we had some kind of a responsible opposition in the Lok Sabha elections. During the first three elections, 1952, 1957, 1962, no political party by itself was closer to getting 10% of total seats in the Lok Sabha, and hence the Nehruvian period did not witness the presence of a recognized opposition as part of the Westminster model of parliamentary democracy. This is due to the weak positioning of other parties as compared to the Indian National Congress. Again, whenever a Congress policy was criticized, it was interpreted either as communal or communist. Moreover, the voices of opposition were stifled as anti-democratic and an hindrance to healthy governance. Again, during the first three elections, there were not enough candidates to be fielded by non-Congress parties in all the constituencies of the country. As such, in most of the seats, Indian National Congress won uncontested. This is not to say that the Indian National Congress was the natural choice of the voters, but the Indian National Congress was the only choice available to the voters. Again, after the first Lok Sabha elections, opposition parties realized that unless like-minded parties coalesced, there was little chance of being recognized in the opposition benches inside the parliament, let alone opposing the Congress. Now let us try to understand official recognition of opposition and when did it come in India. In 1977, the Janata government passed the Salary and Allowances of Leaders of Opposition in the Parliament Act, which accorded statutory recognition and salary and other privileges to the leader of opposition in Parliament. The term opposition was defined quite late in the legislative history of India, as late as 1977 in the Salary and Allowances of Leaders of Opposition in Parliament Act. Section 2 of the Act defined clearly and unambiguously who the leader of opposition in Parliament can be and explained the procedure for identifying the leader of opposition in Parliament in both houses. The definition says, in this Act, leader of opposition in relation to either houses of parliament meant that member of the Council of States or of the House of the People, as the case may be, who is for the time being the leader in that house of the party in opposition to the government, having the greatest numerical strength and recognized as such by the chairman of the Council of States or the Speaker of the House of the People, as the case may be. This definition clause of the 1977 Act does not mention about the 10% membership required. However, the ambiguity has been created from the General Direction 121, Conditions for Party or Group Recognition of the Speaker. Direction number 121 clause C stipulates 1/10 of the total number of members of the House as a requirement for the recognition of a party or group as opposition in Parliament. Here also it should be noted that the direction is related to the recognition of a party in the House and not related to opposition. Nonetheless, the position of recognition of parties according to directions of 120 and 121 had substantially changed after passing the 10th schedule of the Constitution, which is also referred to as the Anti-Defection Act of 1985 and the Representation of People Amendment Act 1988. Let us start with the first official opposition in India. In 1967, the Speaker of the Lok Sabha for the first time recognized a party as an official opposition. And interestingly, the first opposition party came from within the Indian National Congress. With Congress O organization, there being no ideological distinction between the ruling party and the opposition. During the fourth Lok Sabha, Congress itself split in reaction to authoritarian attitude of Mrs. Indira Gandhi, and a new party was formed called the Congress Party in Parliament organization, recognized by Speaker as the Congress Party Opposition. What is significant is that the Speaker of the Lok Sabha for the first time in parliamentary history recognized this party as the official opposition party and its leader as the leader of the opposition, according to Direction 121, Clause 1 of the Directions of the Speaker. Now let us try to understand the role of opposition specifically during the Nehru-Gandhi era. Now, the first general election of 1952 happened to be a gigantic exercise reflecting the political consciousness of the illiterate majority in the country. The Congress party gained 364 of the 489 elected seats, and because of its long association with the freedom struggle, opened up its doors to diverse groups and communities, accommodating all conflicting interests also. Even though left parties like the Communist Party of India played an important role, but it was not towards the last 2 decades of colonial rule only, mostly to give support and recognition to the workers and peasant movements. Socialist factions like the Congress Socialist Party, however, worked within the Congress. No party could secure 1/10 of the total number of seats, and as such, there was no recognized responsible opposition in the first Lok Sabha. The only party which came second, albeit nowhere close to the Congress, was the Socialist Party, which secured just 12 seats. Interestingly, the non-Congress parties did not have enough candidates to field in all constituencies. Now, let us try to understand the second Lok Sabha elections and whether we did have a responsible opposition or not. During the second Lok Sabha elections 1957, which surpassed the first one, and the Congress swept the Lok Sabha polls, winning 371 of 494 elected seats. CPI got 29 seats, PSP got 19, and Jan Sangh just 4 seats. The non-Congress political parties realized that unless and until they united, they would never be able to compete with the Congress. Parties could at best be called second parties, but definitely there was no responsible opposition in the second Lok Sabha elections also. The result of the third elections were a repetition of the earlier 2 Lok Sabha elections, sending the message that there was no alternative to Congress, and that despite evolving a multi-party democracy, the non-Congress parties cannot match with the charisma of the Congress, and therefore no question of a strong opposition to the Congress. The Congress was able to steer smoothly its policies without much opposition. The fourth general elections, 1967, was historic in the sense that, though as usual Congress returned to power, but the elections gradually witnessed the rise of a opposition. Congress' failure to meet the expectations of the people led to the rise of the Swatantra Party. More so, Congress itself was split in reaction to the authoritarian attitude of Mrs. Indira Gandhi, and a new party was formed, Congress Party in Parliament organization, which was recognized by the Speaker as Congress Opposition. However, Congress in opposition did not hesitate to join the ruling party in minority to form a government. The fifth general election witnessed Indira Gandhi steering the Congress to a landslide victory, campaigning on the slogan of Garibi Hatao, and she returned to the parliament with 352 seats. This was the worst period of her rule with 2 major crises: the Indo-China War, the Indo-Pak conflict, as well as the Allahabad High Court ruling declaring her electoral victory beset with corruption. Instead of going for polls, we all know she declared emergency in the country and all opposition leaders were put behind bars. As it is now, a weak opposition now became a non-existent opposition. 1977 to 1989 constitutes another phase of the role of opposition in India. The 6th general election 1977 was historic in the sense that it ended 30 years of Congress dominance in the country. 4 opposition parties, Congress O, Jan Sangh, Bharatiya Lok Dal and Socialist Party, decided to fight the elections as a single party called the Janata Party. The people founded an alternative, and the Janata Party took full advantage of the unpopular rule of the Congress introduced during emergency. The Congress, which was so long in the government, now took the role of opposition. However, the Janata government could not steer the government for 5 years, and because of inner party factionalism, ideological clashes, in 1980 the Congress came back to power with a landslide victory. After the assassination of Mrs. Indira Gandhi in 1984, the Congress got the sympathy of the electorate and once again returned to power with 404 seats, leaving a weak trail of opposition in the country. However, in the next elections of 1989, the Congress could wrest power, but its seat share has considerably declined and the Janata Dal formed the government with 143 seats. Thus, contrary to popular belief, opposition was gradually emerging in the country post 1989, but please note students, it was not a natural offshoot of parliamentary government in India. Now we enter a new era of opposition post 1989. We may say this to be an era of functioning of opposition within a coalitional form of government. The 10th Lok Sabha elections were a mid-term one, as the previous Lok Sabha had been dissolved just 16 months after government formation. The elections were held in a very polarized environment and are also referred to as the Mandal Mandir elections after the two important poll issues, that is the Mandal Commission fallout and the Ram Janmabhoomi Babri demolition in 1991. It was a three-cornered fight. The Congress, the BJP and the National Front Janata Dal Left Front coalition. The result threw a hung parliament, with the Congress emerging as the largest party with 232 seats, while the BJP was second with 120 seats. Janata Dal came a distant third with just 59 seats. The 11th Lok Sabha saw the BJP and its allies coming to power with 187 seats and the Congress forming the opposition. Here we need to see how equations started changing. The Congress, which was the ruling party, now came and occupied the opposition benches. However, let us move on to the next elections, that is the 1999 elections. In 1999, the BJP-led NDA won 182 seats and formed the government, and Congress here played the lead role of the opposition. During the NDA regime, the Congress opposed the Pokhran II tests. Interestingly, students, please note that the same Congress supported and favoured the Pokhran I test during the regime of Mrs. Indira Gandhi in 1974. One more point deserves special attention. Opposition of policies came not only from the opposition parties but also from key ruling allies, which was a feature not present in earlier governments. The NDA regime witnessed the withdrawal of the TMC, an alliance partner opposing the ruling policies. This is an interesting development of coalition politics in what we may be called development of the opposition from within. Let us come to UPA and opposition politics. 2004 saw the coming of the Congress-led UPA to power, the BJP adorning the opposition chair. Key issues like inflation, Indo-US nuclear deal marred the relations between the ruling as well as the opposition. The Indo-US nuclear deal was met with vehement opposition from some political parties. The primary opposition of the nuclear deal in India, however, came from the CPIM and the left allies, which withdrew external support from the UPA on the ground that the deal would undermine India's sovereignty. The government had to go in for a confidence vote, which it successfully survived. Therefore, a key point to note here is that opposition started emerging within the coalition partners themselves. Coming to the 15th Lok Sabha election, students. The 15th Lok Sabha elections witnessed the second phase of UPA rule in the country. But in terms of numbers, the Congress has been able to improve his situation in its favour. In India, the opposition comes for government's policies not only from the opposition but also from within the alliance partners of the ruling party. This is a feature absent in other countries. This is because of the nature of coalition alliances in our country, where the pressure for changing a government's position on a specific issue comes from within the ruling party. This happened during the opposition by the left parties against the Congress in the confidence motion in the India-US nuclear deal. Congress is still today haunted by the allegations raised in the Bofors deal, the 2G scam, the recent Colgate scandal, and so on and so forth. However, please note that students, in 2014, no single opposition party was able to secure 10% of the Lok Sabha seats, because of which the Speaker of the 16th Lok Sabha, Sumitra Mahajan, denied the post of Leader of Opposition in Parliament to the Congress. In the 2014 Lok Sabha elections, we know that BJP won by a huge margin, but it was an NDA surplus coalition government in office. Despite repetitive demands from the Congress, which was still the single largest opposition party in the country with 44 members in the Lok Sabha, the decision was delayed and ultimately denied. According to media reports, the Speaker's decisions relied on directions of the Speaker of Lok Sabha, and the Speaker has been issuing these directions from time to time for regulating certain matters not specified in rules. And the Speaker has based her decision on the basis of past precedent. On this issue of recognition of the Leader of Opposition in Parliament to the Congress, or not recognizing the Congress as the opposition party, the Speaker also consulted the Attorney General of India, Mukul Rohtagi, at that point of time. Let's come to 2019 Lok Sabha elections and see the role of opposition currently. After the results of the 2019 Lok Sabha elections were declared, the NDA emerged victorious with a massive majority of 353 seats in Lok Sabha. The Congress could manage only 52 seats, which left it just outside the ambit of 55 seats required to meet the 10% criteria of the opposition party. However, there are no statutes or Speaker's directives that have specifically stated the 10% requirement for the post of the Leader of Opposition in Parliament. The matter of deciding the position of Leader of Opposition in Parliament is conclusively with the ambit of the Speaker of the Lok Sabha. According to the 1977 law, the Speaker could confer the LOP status to the leader of the single largest party in opposition to the ruling party or alliance. Though the Speaker has declined the position of LOP, as a matter of fact, it can be challenged in the court. Now let us try to understand the role of opposition in the present political context. In the present political context, the government seems legally bound to consult the Leader of Opposition in the selection of certain important constitutional and political positions in the country. For example, appointments to some crucial positions like the Central Vigilance Commissioner or the Chief of the CBI needs some kind of a ratification from the Leader of Opposition. The Leader of the Opposition has a definite role to play in appointing to these selective posts, according some legislations. But students, please note that this position is not a constitutional one. This seems to contradict the other rule that the leadership of the opposition cannot belong to a party with fewer than 10% of the seats in Parliament. Now, finally, let's come to the significance of an opposition in India, even though opposition constitutes a weak position in the Indian political system. It may be said that the opposition's role in Indian politics needs to be understood in the light of peculiarities in the Indian political system. The vote share of the 2019 NDA government is 44.2% with a seat share of 353 out of 543 seats. So, the NDA government has got 44.2% seats. Now, let us look into the total opposition parties, what is their seat share and what is their percentage of votes? The vote share of all opposition parties combined is 55.8%, though the number of seats is 190. Now, if you look into the vote share of the ruling and the opposition party, the combined popular support is therefore for the opposition, who has got 55.8% votes, and not for the ruling party, which has got 44.2% vote share. And this is a significant point to note, that how this large section is legitimately represented in a representative democracy. An official or designated opposition is to be seen as an authorized instrument for a cogent representation. Now, there are certain peculiarities which should be seen in the Indian context. The parties may join an opposition alliance or a ruling alliance depending on opportunistic concerns. In the absence of rigid ideologies, there is no constraint to forming of alliances in India, left, right or centre. Whenever the Congress has been in the opposition except 1998, it has always ensured that non-Congress ruling governments does not complete the time, and every time the Congress has provided external support and then it has withdrawn its support as the crucial time. And every time after such withdrawal from the Congress had returned to power with a greater majority. Now, we need to understand that a weak opposition or not, opposition is indispensable for the functioning of a democracy. A powerful opposition is necessary to check the power of the ruling class, as dissent is extremely important for mature democracies to function. Right to dissent is a part of responsible government formation. The need for the opposition has been considered in parliamentary democracy. According to the noted scholar of political science, Sir Ivor Jennings, if there is no opposition, there is no democracy. According to another constitutional expert, Lowell, the constant presence of a recognized opposition and the existence of a party in opposition with a program within limits of possible public opinion is a bulwark against tyranny, not only of a despot but also of a fanatical majority. To conclude our discussion of opposition in Indian politics, according to veteran constitutional expert Subhash Kashyap, he notes that no new rules are needed. It's the nature of government-opposition relations that need fixing. In the present scenario, the government considers the opposition untouchable. And the opposition is always opposing everything the government does. They are just not working together. The success of parliamentary democracy in India thus necessitates a harmonious balance between the ruling and the opposition in the interest of the citizens. And above all, the opposition parties has to create a confidence through positive action that they are truly an alternate government. They can truly provide an alternative government to the citizens. Therefore, opposition has a significant role to play in a parliamentary democracy like India. Thank you. That's all for today.